Welcome to the first Herd Yard podcast. We're on with Bryan Milburn from Milburn American Wagyu out of Colorado. Welcome, Bryan.
That's good to be here.
We just wanted to cover a couple things. One, I thought you'd just start with where you're from and the operation that you run out in Colorado.
We live just a little bit south of a tiny town on the eastern plains of Colorado. It's called Arrowhead. My granddad bought this place in 1946 and moved his family from western Kansas. Pretty much been involved in livestock my whole life. I took some time off, obviously, while I was in college, that type of thing, but always been involved to some degree. We're actually fifth generation Angus producers. We ran a lot of Angus cattle for a long time when this thing was firing on all cylinders. We used to run 200 cow-calf pairs. And I mean, it was a full-time job. The kids were home though. And when we had lots of help, had free labor in the form of kids, we stayed pretty busy for a long time. The kids went to college, grew up, moved away, and I just couldn't keep that many cow-calf pairs going by myself. So we decided to get a little bit smaller.
So then you guys got into raising Wagyu.
That's what started it. We were looking for a way to get into a little bit smaller operation, still be sustainable, still maintain the approximate revenue. And I'd always been interested for quite some time in the frozen genetics side of the industry. And in the Angus breed, the frozen genetics, that market was pretty well saturated years ago. But I saw an opportunity with the Wagyu breed to kind of get in, not necessarily on the ground floor, but before the thing really took off. So that's what we did. We kept our 50 best Angus mother cows and bought a Wagyu bull.
You said you were kind of in at the start. Can you just give me a brief history of how Wagyu made it into the United States, and then where you kind of came into play in all of that? And then eventually I would like to talk about how you brought Australia in as well.
Well, in the 70s, and it was back before, we were running a bunch of Angus cattle, and we would just hear rumors about this new breed, these Wagyu cattle, and there weren't a lot of them around. And there were like foundation breeders, Jerry Reeves, and then some people in Texas too. Some of the older, the more foundation members of this breed within the United States. Those are the guys that really took it on. And honestly, they did most of the heavy lifting. When we started becoming interested in the breed 10 or 12 years ago, a lot of the groundwork had been established. And I say all the time that the Wagyu breed here in the United States, I used to say they were 50 years behind the Angus people. And now I think as a breed, they're roughly 30 years behind, the Angus people. They've knocked the horns off those cattle. The genetics have come a long way. We're still fine-tuning the Wagyu breed, trying to develop maternal strength, better feet, this type of thing, but we're making some progress.
So in your opinion, why Wagyu over Angus?
It's almost like a different marketplace. I mean, there were so many Angus cattle around. The Angus brand had been established, the certified Angus cattle. That market was developed, functioning, sustainable, making a lot of money. And like I mentioned before, the Wagyu people, we really didn't know. We heard rumors of these cattle, and a lot of us had never even, seen something unless it was in a magazine or happened to catch a news story on TV. In fact, when we started looking for our first bull, we had a hard time finding a producer that we could actually buy something from. There weren't a lot of Angus cattle, there weren't a lot of Wagyu cattle here in the United States.
So then you guys decided that you were going to get into Wagyu, and who did you buy your first Wagyu from?
That's kind of an interesting story. We were pretty excited, and I should have probably done a little bit more homework than I did. I was used to working with Angus, where there were a lot of producers. Everybody kind of knew each other. There was reputation, this type of thing. And I went with a producer, basically the first or second producer that I encountered, and I'd realized that these are hard cattle to get. And in fact, I jumped on a bull. I wished I would have waited a little bit longer than I did. I bought a bull and then found out after I bought the bull that genetically he was a good bull, but he wasn't really what we were looking for. So I kept that bull for a little while. We used him for about a year. And by that point in time, I'd reached out and found more producers and actually did the homework I should have done in the first place. And I ran into Sherry Walker Cattle Company, just north of Fort Worth. And we went down there and actually bought our first good Wagyu bull and then a cow calf pair. And that's actually where we got our true functioning start.
So before we get into Australia, how did you develop the breed that live on your ranch right now? How did you develop them to what they are today? Because I know you do a lot of genetics and you sell a lot of straws and embryos.
Well, there wasn't a lot of information, and you kind of had to dig to get accurate information. And I found that the further south I went, as I got into Texas, it was like I'd found the motherland. There were producers, there was genetics, there were people that were willing to share their story, and that's when we started spending more and more time working with producers out of Texas. And as a little kid, I actually spent a little bit of time in Texas. I love Texas. And there was an opportunity to get back to Texas, spend time in a place that I really enjoyed and work with people that were as excited about the breed as I was. And that's when this thing really took off. We got lucky. We bought some good cattle. We started working with the frozen genetics side of the Wagyu breed, bought some really good donor cows, spent some money, but we were still driving 12 or 14 hours to get any kind of genetic work done. Again, it was just hard to find somebody outside of the state where we could get work done. We finally found an embryologist in Utah that was only 6 hours away. And that felt like a short trip after driving to Texas for a couple years.
So now what is the main part of the Milburn American Wagyu business on the ranch? How does that run? How do you guys function? What do you sell?
When we were for generations, when we were in the Angus cattle, we were known, the Milburns were known for producing good, solid replacement heifers. And my granddad actually put a lot of time and work into developing what he called his super mama cows. So that's one thing I've been around my whole life through, my granddad, my dad, even though they didn't get along, I still had exposure to that. We've always been focused on maternal strength, maternal success. And that was one point with the Wagyu breed that really needed some work. Historically, and even more or less up until today, they're not known as good mothers. So when we took on the breed, that was pretty much our focus point. We were going to establish some good, solid maternal genetics. And that's what we did. It took us, 6 or 8 years before we started to see some of that work pay off. But that's what we've got today is we've got an amazing program producing maternally strong Wagyu cattle and frozen genetics. We do quite a bit of frozen genetics, and a lot of that has to do with the other side of that, the steers and the pairs and the bulls and this type of thing, is actually a result of, like my wife, Anna, her philosophy. Her philosophy is a cow should be given the opportunity to be a cow. And I would be excited about, getting the work done, getting them flushed, getting bulls collected, that kind of thing. And Anna just put her foot down and made the point that our cows every year will get the opportunity to raise a calf and just be a mother cow. So it slowed us down a little bit, but it gave us an opportunity to observe our genetics as it was playing out. We don't use sexed semen, where you can actually buy semen and get a bull calf or a heifer calf. For the most part, it's fairly accurate, but sexed semen, I don't believe is as viable as just conventional semen. To make a long story short, we use conventional semen. So as a result, we have bulls as well. But the bulls that we're producing are maternal strength type bulls. These are the kind of bulls that produce good sound daughters. It's basically the same direction that we're taking our program, but we're getting it from both sides of the equation, on the bull side plus on the cow side. And what we do is, we had those 50 really good Angus mother cows. We were using those for recip cattle and putting embryos in them. Well, we would give each cow the opportunity twice. We would give them the opportunity 2 times to take an embryo and raise a calf. And a lot of times it doesn't work out. To make a long story short, we would cover them with a Wagyu bull. And that's where we ended up with the meat side, which isn't our focus, but we were using Wagyu bulls to clean up our Angus recip cows and getting F1 Angus Wagyu cross calves out of the deal, which are really good mothers, and they finish well on the steer side, but it wasn't really our focus. But that's how we ended up offering heifers, steers, bulls, cow-calf pairs, frozen genetics. We offer it all, mainly just because that's the dynamics of our program.
So where you sit right now, what's your focus in 2026, 2027?
I'm at the point in my life where a good friend told me there's a point in your life where it's okay to put down the labor part of the process and mentor and teach a little bit. And it took me a minute or two to accept that, but I'm at the point where I think my focus needs to be less cattle, frozen genetics, quality frozen genetics. There's talk of a pretty strong El Nino winter here in Colorado. I'm getting tired of just getting up every morning and hoping the tractor will start. So
Yeah.
we're going to keep our best cattle. We're probably going to sell the majority of the Angus cows and just become streamlined, I guess, is what I'm hoping to accomplish over the next couple of years. Our genetics are to the point where I need them to be. It took us 10 or 12 years. We've arrived. I'm where I need to be. I don't need the cattle that I carried in the past. And I'm going to slow down a little bit, catch my breath, and enjoy it for a while.
I do think, at Herd Yard, we talk to a lot of young producers who have no clue what they're doing. And I think that there's coming a time when they're going to need the mentoring of people that have been in the industry for a long time, that know what they're doing. And I think there's a lot of value there in what you know. And I think, like any industry, I think as these young guys come in, I think it would be very beneficial for them to pay consultants on how to farm correctly, especially if they're getting into genetics, especially with Wagyu. And so I think there should be a consulting industry in the cattle industry that can take guys that have been in the industry for 40 years and transition them over to consultants so that we can continue to maintain these farms that we have now, but with younger guys.
I think you're right. And I've watched this for years. And I think the cattle industry as a whole, is approaching a crossroads. Is what you're going to see moving forward is a lot of corporate owned ranches and farms. We're already seeing it. And an individual producer, a younger producer, to actually get in the game, he's going to have to be extremely good at what he's doing, able to seek out knowledge. It was a lot easier 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Back when I was starting out, there was land available, there were cattle. It's become so competitive that to be successful now, a young producer, they're going to have to bring their A game.
Yeah.
And it's going to take every resource available for them to actually make it work. I mean, just the fixed costs, the input costs, everything. You're just going to have to be the best of the best if you're going to stay in business.
So while we're here on this topic, I'm just curious, just because it's in the news right now. Trump's bringing in 800,000, I don't know, pounds, or I don't know what it was, of beef from Argentina. Just give me your 10,000-foot view on that. Is it bad? Is it good? What is it?
Honestly, it's insignificant.
Okay.
America consumes hamburger, and we will never produce enough hamburger. So we're going to get hamburger. McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, they're going to get their hamburger. They have to source it in a way where they can make money. The stuff that we're importing from outside of the United States, the quality's just not there. That meat that they're talking about bringing into the United States, that doesn't threaten me or a legitimate producer, one bit. I'm not selling to McDonald's.
So I'm seeing all these guys complain on Facebook. Why are they complaining?
Because it's Facebook and that's what they do.
Okay. Okay,
Um,
good.
there's always got to be a story. There's always going to be something to, get somebody to click on your page or like me. Yeah, 3 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, this'll just be ancient history. There'll be something else to get excited about.
I think I read too that
2 years ago, it was the Australian meat that was
yeah.
coming to the United States. Oh my gosh, it was the end of the world. Well, the Australians, and not just Wagyu, but the Australian meat producers, it's good commercial grade cattle, but they're not competing against the Angus guy who's 65% of his production scores prime.
Yeah.
He's got his niche, and nobody's gonna invade that from outside of the borders.
So this is a good segue then. So you were instrumental in, if not single-handedly, brought in the Australian Wagyu Association. Tell me how you did that, why it's a good thing for the Wagyu industry, and where you guys are today with that.
As I mentioned before, when we were getting into the breed, it was hard to get information. There just wasn't a lot going on. And when I bought that first good bull from Sherry Walker, we were talking, and I said, "What adds value to these cattle right now? What makes this bull worth 10,000 and a different bull worth 6,500?" And she said, "Well, it's data and genetics." And she mentioned that the Australians were so far ahead of the United States as far as gathering data, carcass evaluation, years and years ahead of the United States. So I got to looking at the Australian Wagyu Association, and she was right. They were years ahead of the work that was being done here in the States. And I thought, you know what? There is some value here. And I need to make it easier for this other producer to have this, to get this knowledge. I searched long and hard to find this. And I thought, we need to put this in front of the Wagyu producers here in the United States. They can assess it on however they want on its own merit, but there is some value here for somebody that's willing to wade through it. And there was a little bit of animosity, is probably too strong a word, but there was the American Association and the Australian Association, and you could register cattle back and forth between the associations. It was a challenge, but they cooperated on that front. But that was about as far as that cooperation went. And I finally thought, I'll just cut to the chase. I'll reach out to Australia. By this point in time, I was president of the Texas Wagyu Association, where I had at least somebody would answer my call. If I called, "Hey, this is Bryan with the TWA," it had a little bit more influence than, "Hey, this is Bryan, out here in Eastern Colorado trying to start a tractor." But anyway, I reached out to Australia through the Texas Association, and they were very receptive and flew a team over. We met in Fort Worth. The meeting was fantastic. That was about 4 years ago, and that has actually developed into a partnership between the Texas Wagyu Association and the Australian Wagyu Association. It's known as the International Wagyu Corporation, and they're members in 30 countries. This thing really took off, and it's been huge for the member base, the Australian member base, the Texas member base. Those people are reaping a lot of value out of that relationship, just through the availability of data and information, if nothing else.
So tell me why should you register your animals with both America and Australia?
It depends on what you're doing. If you're where we're selling seed stock cattle, we have potential customers that are American Association members. We have other potential customers that are Australian members. So we register our cattle basically with both associations, just so the potential customer, that producer that buys from us, will have a seamless registration process. It's a lot easier for them to make their programs function with the two registrationing associations.
So you mentioned that the Australia Wagyu Association has better data. Talk to me about what is better data, and will the American Association get there?
Well, the quality of any data pretty much determines, first off, how accurate it is when you collect it, but the more data you have, the more accurate that information is. There are ranches in Australia that are registering thousands and thousands of cattle. There are huge ranches in Australia that generate data, accurate data. So it makes that information a lot more reliable. Where here in the United States, we have a lot of producers, but they're smaller. It's taken a little while for that process to get any kind of traction. It's like anything else. The more data you have, the better it is.
Yeah, yeah. So America will get there at some point. It just might take a little bit longer.
They will. The American Association, they will get there. And just recently, they converted to this helical system, which is the same system that Australia's been using. The only thing that the Americans don't have that Australia has right now is the number of cattle in that database, and they're building that. At some point in time, I don't know what Australia has now. It's 500,000 or 600,000 head in their database. I don't know where the Americans are at, but I don't think they're much over. This is just a guess, 50,000, maybe less than 100,000 head in their database. But they've taken a huge step with this helical process. They're making progress, and it's a good, solid effort. It'll bear fruit at some point. Another thing, just to touch on, is the American Association is more foundation genetics based. A lot of that stuff that came over in the 70s from Japan, those genetics have stayed within the United States and are readily acceptable by the producers, where the Australians have actually moved beyond to newer genetics. The carcasses are bigger. Like I said, they're years ahead of us, but we're catching up.
So in your mind, what is the future of the American Wagyu in the United States? What's the future of the breed here?
There's a lot of potential for the breed. At this point in time, I see us still we're not in our infancy, but I don't know that we've even reached our teenage years at this point. As more and more product becomes available to the average consumer, that's when people are going to actually get a taste of this stuff. Not something that's legitimately, good, solid Wagyu cattle, not something that's just alleged to be. That's another another problem that we've had in the past, is there were producers that were claiming they were producing Wagyu cattle that weren't necessarily the quality that the breed is capable of. But as quality Wagyu meat reaches the average consumer, this will really take off, because it's better product. I mean, it marbles, it tastes better. All you got to do is taste it, and you'll want more.
Is it true that it takes longer to get it to weight before you can bring it to slaughter?
No, that's not true. That's a misconception. With some of the foundation genetics, some and not all, but some of the foundation genetics and even some of the Australian stuff takes longer to finish. But through the advancement in genetics, I can take good, solid Australian genetics, and I've done it. I mean, I can produce an 1,100 pound full blood Wagyu carcass on the hook in 24 months. I mean, I can produce full blood Wagyu carcasses shoulder to shoulder with the Angus guy down the road.
So, yeah, because I hear that all the time. People say, I talk to them, and because we have a lot of Wagyu genetic guys on herd yard right now. And the biggest complaint is that it'll take too long to get them to weight. And I think that's where education is going to come into play for a lot of the producers that are looking at Wagyu and saying, is it worth the purchase for me to buy it? And so I won't lose money on it when I could just buy Angus and sell it high right now.
Well, and you're entirely right. And I think that's another thing. I'm may step on some toes here, but I mean, we raise black Wagyu cattle, but there's also red Wagyu cattle, the Akaushi cattle, and they've already done it. I mean, those cattle are bigger, they're Wagyu. They've already shown they can produce shoulder to shoulder with a Charolais or an Angus or a Brangus producer. In my opinion, the red cattle don't marble quite as well, but the red side's already there. And the black cattle are not that far behind. And it's just going to be a matter of, the hardest part is is convincing that Angus producer or somebody producing another breed because they've heard that,
Yeah.
Wagyu cattle don't finish. They don't finish. And that's the point of education right now that think people need to make is yes, they do finish. If you get the right genetics, you can have this level of quality in your product in the same amount of time that you're using right now, the same amount of feed, the same amount of resources, but it's an education issue.
Yeah. So, all right, two last questions. What's the biggest business opportunity in Wagyu right now for producers, in your opinion?
I think right now the biggest opportunity, and I tend to have tunnel vision. I try to look at everything from, my perspective, but I think right now there's a lot of opportunity in the F1 market, the Wagyu crossed with Angus, the Wagyu crossed with Charolais. I talked to a Charolais producer yesterday, in fact, a guy in Texas that called me who had Wagyu bulls. And that F1, that heterosis, that cross makes for a more vigorous, healthy animal. You get the marble, you get the quality of, that Charolais, of that Angus. That's where the opportunity, I think, right now is because what's going to pave the way and make money moving forward is meat sales. And that I think is where the opportunity is at. These guys that have a lot of Wagyu bulls standing around, I think at some point the industry in general is going to see the value of those genetics, and that's when I think things are going to really take off. You're going to see a lot of that F1 product available at a reasonable price to the average consumer across the country, and that's when we've arrived. When we get to the point where anyone can get their hand on a Wagyu or an F1 steak if they want.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So then lastly, you're on Herd Yard. You have an incredible profile with us. You have a lot of animals listed. Just kind of walk me through what you have listed and what you're selling right now and why people should buy what you have.
It's interesting. Before Herd Yard, you kind of had to chase a lot of rabbits. If you had bulls for sale, you had to seek out and find that bull marketplace. If you had maternal type animals for sale, that was a different consumer. If you had, say, steers, meat kind of product for sale, you had to find a different consumer. I spent a lot of time looking for a place to market my cattle. I had all of that. I had bulls, cows, heifers, pairs, steers. I had all the product and not one platform that made it easy for me to get in front of a potential marketplace. That's one thing I really liked about it. Like I talked about before, we don't use sex semen. As a result, I've got a lot of bulls standing around. And that was the first thing I needed a way to market some bulls. And that was one of the things that took off for me. We didn't necessarily set the world on fire the first couple weeks, but the phone was ringing and we sold some cattle and it became easier to get more and more involved. And I'm not a computer kind of guy at all, but I found that it was very easy to work within the platform to keep my product updated and, just stay in a position where I could be found. That's what made it nice. I'd put myself in a position where I could be found by somebody looking for my product, my genetics.
And I know you sell a lot of semen and embryos as well. And I think one thing we're working on right now, and hopefully we'll have out in the next week or so, is the ability to basically use e-commerce inside the Herd Yard platform to sell the semen and embryos through Herd Yard. I think that's going to be really cool. I think the next thing that I think is going to benefit the Wagyu industry big time is Herd Yard beef is in the works. So we'll market out to the consumer so that the producers can offer the type of beef that our consumers are looking for. And I think that's going to be kind of a game changer for herd yard, but also for our producers. And I think that's going to be pretty cool for the future.
Well, and I think that's one thing that I'm really excited about is the frozen genetics side of this. For quite some time, we would just sell online through some online actions or online auctions that happened, throughout the course of the year. It was nice. We sold some product, but we were kind of at the mercy of the marketplace as well. Where now through herd yard, it's private treaty. You have the opportunity to actually talk to that producer for that potential producer. It's so much easier to do straightforward, just business. We kind of cut the middleman out of the thing. It'll make it definitely easier to get paid. I'm very excited about when the e-commerce thing comes online.
Yeah, we are too. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have that out. So we're going to be at the American Wagyu Born to be Prime conference in September. So if you guys are, anybody watching this, if you're going to be down there, swing by our booth. Bryan will be with us, and we hope to be able to talk with you guys. And we're kind of excited to see where herd yard's going, but I think where herd yard can help out the Wagyu industry as well. And I know it's helped Bryan, and I know that last thing I was going to say too, I think you have talked to quite a few guys that are Angus producers that have looked at buying semen from you for an F1 program on their farm. And I think one of the biggest things that, when they call me, I have them call Bryan because I always get the question, is it going to take me longer to get them to weigh? Is it going to cost me more money? And I think Bryan's been a really great resource for us, just sending people over to him to kind of talk them through that issue as well. So
it's been exciting. We've kept maintained those relationships with some of our Angus friends from throughout the year, and it's exciting moving forward, sharing the story. And look me up, make you a hell of a deal on a bull.
Yeah, I'll put Bryan's on this podcast. I'll put a QR code. So you see the QR code. That QR code will go to Bryan's profile page on Herd Yard, and you can buy direct from him. The cool thing about Herd Yard is there's no commissions, so you can buy direct from Bryan, and there's no extra fees for the buyer or the seller when it's a private treaty transaction. So definitely give him a call and get what you need over there. And yeah. So Bryan, I just want to say thanks for jumping on today. It was kind of a all over the place, random conversation, but I think there's a lot of good information. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you down in Oklahoma in the next couple of weeks.
I look forward to it. Thank you.